Hi friends! I was practicing drawing some trees the other day that I shared on my Instagram stories, and a few people asked if I would do a tutorial, and I thought, hey, that's a good idea, so let's do that. This will mostly be focusing on drawing the leaf portions of the tree, because as you can see, my process for the trunk isn't really nailed down and consistent yet. The basic process involves creating a blob and then drawing kind of a leafy textured shapes in a gradated fashion so the colors will gradually get lighter towards one section of the blob, and then taking several of those blobs and putting them together to form the leafy part of the tree. If you just want to do one blob, you can make a little bush like in the bottom right corner, or a simpler tree. By combining multiple blobs, you can do like an Animal Crossing tree like in the bottom left corner, or the pink tree on the top, or the green tree on the top right. And if you add even more blobs, you can create a bushier looking tree like the two examples on the bottom row in the middle. The uniformity of the shape of your blobs will have a big impact on how your finished trees look. If you go for more circular shapes, you'll get more like the Animal Crossing tree. If you go for completely organic shapes, you're going to get more natural looking trees like on the top row. The process of making one of these blobs is a lot similar to the way you would draw any kind of 3D object like a sphere. Instead of creating like a shadow, what you're doing is changing the color from a lighter value to a darker value, maybe changing the hue if you want, like I did with this kind of autumn palette. And instead of blending the colors together to get a smooth sphere like on the far left, you basically create a more banded system and then add just like blobby shapes. And I'm just like tapping my pen to make these little shapes that represent leaves. And they don't look like leaves, but in the end, it gives that effect without having to, painstakingly draw little leaf shapes. I'm just, making little pen taps here and there. I start off any tree by creating my palette first for the leaves. And I generally do something like 8 to 10 colors. I'm not sitting and counting them out, but just enough to get a gradient that I think looks right. And a lot of people's natural instinct is probably going to be to pick a color and then just step up the brightness, lower the saturation till you get a lighter and lighter and lighter color of the same hue. The result ends up looking really flat and boring. It's not very interesting to look at. If you like this, that's fine. If that's the look you want to go for it. But I prefer my palette to have a more dynamic look to it. And the way I achieve that is I start with the darkest color usually, and I, instead of just, making the color lighter, I increase the brightness and saturation, and then I will shift the hue to a slightly warmer tone every few steps. So I'll pick a red, make it a slightly lighter red, and then the next time I go a little bit lighter, I'll also shift the hue slider more towards orange. And so it's eventually getting more and more yellow instead of just bright going from red to a peach color. It goes from red to yellow. Same with the purple. It goes from a more bluish purple to a much more pinky purple. And that creates the effect of like sunlight. Sunlight has a natural warmth to it, so it would make sense as the sunlight is stronger in certain areas, the colors would not only be lighter, but they would be warmer. If the environment has a different temperature of light, like if the tree is in an environment that has very cool light, the increase in warmth probably would not be present. So to start any tree, I start with a super basic sketch of the shapes of these individual blobs that I'm going to be making. In this example, I'm going to be doing like an Animal Crossing tree, so that's just 3 simple circles, and you don't even need to really sketch the trunk at all. I just kind of put it there. Then I create a new layer for each blob above the sketch. Be sure not to color anything on the sketch layer. I reduce the opacity of the sketch just so it's not as distracting when I'm coloring. I use my Chubby Boy pen to get started by selecting the darkest color, and I draw the shape that I've sketched out. And after that, it's just refining the edge to add the little leaf shape so it's not a just flat, smooth shape. There's no real secret to this part. I just keep adding little leaves and I try to avoid making anything look too regular and uniform. And if I notice an area does look too uniform, I'll go back in and try to add something or erase something and change it to make it look a little more organic. And once I have that shape done, I turn on alpha lock before I start working on the gradient. And I'll select the next lighter color, and I will start adding that second band of color the way you saw on the slide with the autumn leaves. So it's basically just the same process all over again of picking a smaller area of that shape and adding the leafy shaped edges just in a lighter color. I might add little sections of leaves outside of that shape just to represent like one single leaf that's catching light here and there. And that just helps the gradient flow a little bit better, kind of like you would see in a halftone. And from there, it's just rinse and repeat. You select your next color in the gradient, select a smaller area of the initial shape, and add your little leaves and keep going. If the idea of drawing the individual leaf shapes seems tedious, time-consuming, and unappealing to you, I did try and make a different kind of brush that would simulate that. But I just ended up not really liking the way it looked. It didn't offer the variation and control that I wanted. So, I mean, y'all can use it if you like. It wasn't my cup of tea. Maybe there's something better out there that already exists that I'm unaware of, but I just prefer the control of drawing each individual leaf. It doesn't actually take as much time as it sounds. Now I've moved on to the second leafy section of the tree, and that means I'm working on a new layer for it. This layer is actually below the one that I did previously, so the process is just the same. The only thing is there's a little section that is overlapped by the first blob, so I don't have to worry about that tiny section of the tree. And when you get to the last section, it's just the same process all over again, just with less of the blob visible. As I said, I don't really have a set process for the trunk yet. Right now, it's mostly just filling in with color, adding some grain lines if I feel like it, adding some shadow to it. If I have a better process at a later time, I will update y'all on that. But for now, it's just kind of experimentation. And that's really all there is to it. I'll just leave you with 2 time-lapse videos from Procreate on 2 other trees from the first example slide. Thanks. Bye.